Alright, fellow survivors, gather around close, because the tale I'm about to spin is one that might just send a shiver crawling down your spine. And if it does, maybe you'll consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more stories from the edge. It really helps keep these tales coming, you know? And while you're at it, drop a comment. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. We're all in this survival thing together, aren't we? Now, let's plunge into the dark. This is a story about a future I prayed would remain just a nightmare, a chilling echo in the back of my mind. Ever since I was knee-high, a feeling, cold and persistent, had taken root in my gut. Modern life, this delicate dance we call society, could unravel in a heartbeat. Maybe it was the relentless news cycle, the constant drumbeat of natural disasters and whispers of global conflict. Maybe it was just the raw, untamed unpredictability of the world itself. Whatever the seed, it sprouted into an obsession. Weekends, holidays, any sliver of free time. They were swallowed whole by survival guides, gear tests, and the slow, steady accumulation of essentials in my basement. People laughed, of course. Friends, bless their oblivious hearts, would chuckle about my overly cautious nature. Neighbors would cast those sidelong glances whenever they caught me lugging boxes of freeze-dried meals or water jugs into the house. I'll admit, sometimes, in the quiet moments, doubt would creep in. Who really wants to spend their precious time contemplating societal collapse? But the doubts never lasted long. Something inside, a primal instinct perhaps, insisted it was better to be ready than to be sorry. Eventually, this caution, this preparedness, became a part of me, a second skin. Solar panels sprouted on my roof, a modest generator hummed in the shed, and my doors and windows were reinforced, steel against wood. The basement, my sanctuary, gained a separate entrance, bolted solid from the inside. I even dove into the grim world of basic medical procedures, stocked a first aid kit that could rival a small clinic. Over the years, I'd run drills, small simulations of chaos, weekends pretending the power was out, imagining a week confined within my walls. These exercises, at first, felt like games, almost a perverse form of entertainment, until the morning it all began. From that moment on, time stretched and warped, each hour a slow, agonizing cycle, demanding every ounce of knowledge, every skill I had ever gleaned. What follows is a detailed record of the first 12 hours. If you're reading this, I pray it offers some glimpse into the maelstrom that engulfed our community, perhaps even the world. Maybe, just maybe, it can offer a flicker of guidance in the darkness. 6:30 a.m., the unsettling news. It started like any other day. My phone alarm, that grating digital chime, jolted me awake at 6:30. The usual routine followed. Splash of cold water to the face, the rich, dark brew of morning coffee, and then the scroll through the digital news feed. Initial headlines were the usual humdrum, local budget squabbles, election updates, the celebrity gossip that somehow clawed its way into the headlines. Then, buried beneath the noise, a shorter piece snagged my attention. Strange illness reported in nearby city. The news clip was brief, shaky footage of people stumbling, almost dancing in slow motion, in a crowded urban space. Disoriented, the report called it. They'd pause, heads cocked, gazes unfocused, as if lost in a fog, then crumple to the ground. Other people, passers-by, blurred faces in the shaky video, would try to help, but the camera abruptly cut away. The anchor, a somber face on a clean, sterile set, apologized for the interruption. The station cut to a commercial. Odd, I thought, but not necessarily alarming. Despite my ingrained cautiousness, my first instinct was to dismiss it as a localized health scare. Contaminated food batch? A new, virulent flu strain, not yet fully categorized? Something contained, manageable. I set my phone down, a nagging unease prickling at the edges of my calm. I flipped on my shortwave radio. The static-laced channels usually coughed up local chatter, the whispers and murmurs that the mainstream stations missed. After a stretch of white noise, a voice, faint and distorted, cut through. Urgent message, please, inside, unknown infection, isolate immediately. The words faded in and out, swallowed by the ether. I leaned closer to the speaker, straining to decipher the garbled message. The voice repeated a variation of "stay in your homes," but the reception was abysmal, a broken puzzle of phrases. Even so, the tone, the raw, panicked urgency of the broadcast felt dire. This, I realized, might be different. Different than the garden variety emergencies I'd always envisioned. I flicked the light switch in my kitchen, bright, normal. Water pressure in the tap, strong, consistent. Internet connection, humming along, oblivious to any unfolding crisis. If there was a problem, it hadn't yet seeped into my quiet suburban neighborhood, hadn't disrupted the basic veins of modern life. I stepped onto my front porch, scanned the street. Gray sky, clouds drifting like indifferent ships across the horizon. Nothing seemed out of place. My street, normally bustling with early morning commuters, was unnervingly quiet. Still, something weighed. A premonition, heavy and cold. I turned back inside, the decision already made. Basement. Supplies. Inventory check. 7:30 a.m. Rapid updates. An hour later, I was in the cool, concrete embrace of my basement, a flashlight beam cutting through the dimness. Water jugs, stacked neat and reassuring. Canned meals, rows upon rows, silent soldiers in a culinary army. Freeze-dried packets, lightweight and potent, ready for deployment. Solar-charged lanterns, first aid kits in their sturdy cases, emergency blankets crinkling softly in their vacuum-sealed bags. Everything was in order. My quick inventory confirmed it. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something close to relief sparked within me. If something big was coming, at least I wouldn't be caught flat-footed. Back upstairs, the television flickered to life. Breaking news banners snaked across the bottom of the screen, urgent red against stark white. Authorities urging citizens in certain regions to remain indoors. An official press conference, replayed in an endless loop, filled the screen. An unknown illness has been reported. Symptoms include confusion and unsteady motor function. We urge everyone to avoid close contact with anyone who appears unwell. The officials spoke in measured tones, attempting to project calm, but their eyes betrayed a dawning, overwhelming panic. In the background of the footage, another official swayed, gripping the podium, visibly struggling to maintain balance. Suddenly, the broadcast glitched, the screen dissolving into a static snowstorm. Technical difficulties. A text announcement flashed when the signal returned. The anchor, the composed face from before, was gone. Just the text, urging calm, repeated over and over. That abrupt shift, the jarring silence that followed the official pronouncements, set my teeth on edge. Even during severe weather events, TV stations rarely cut out so abruptly, so completely. This felt disorganized, like the station had lost contact with their field reporters, or worse, was actively trying to control a rapidly escalating situation behind the scenes. Outside, a few neighbors had gathered in loose clumps, heads bent over phones, hushed conversations rippling through the morning air. Car engines coughed to life here and there, though far fewer people than normal seemed to be starting their morning commute. I moved through my house, closing and locking windows, double-checking the front and back doors. Security protocols, drilled into me over years of preparation, clicked into place. Reduce visibility from the outside. Make my home look uninviting, uninteresting to anyone who might be opportunistic. Be prepared to move, to retreat to the basement sanctuary if things went truly south. A wave of unease, cold and clammy, washed over me. Laptop open, I dove into the chaotic currents of social media, searching for citizen reports, unfiltered information. Videos started appearing, shaky cell phone footage, raw and disturbing. People moaning, limping in the streets, some with torn clothing, glazed eyes. In some clips, bystanders, caught in the crosshairs of the unfolding crisis, tried to help, only to be chased off, even attacked. One video, particularly unnerving, showed a small crowd near a bus stop. A figure in the center of the group suddenly lashed out. Posture stiff, movements jerky and unnatural. The crowd scattered like startled birds. These snippets, fragmented and incomplete, hinted at something more than just illness. A level of aggression, a disturbing violence, laced through the reports. Mental note: beyond typical sickness. This was something else. Something violent. My initial, desperate thought: rabies? A new, mutated strain? In that chaotic moment, no official source confirmed anything, but rumors, wild and unsettling, were already swirling on message boards, whispers of biting, of infection spreading through contact. That was enough. Enough to solidify my resolve. Stay inside. Hunker down. The world outside was shifting, fracturing. My home, for now, was my island. 8:30 a.m. Sirens and lockdowns. The TV, glued to the local news channel, cycled through the same emergency messages, a broken record of official pronouncements and vague warnings. Occasionally, a phone number flashed on screen, a helpline for citizens. Curiosity overriding caution for a moment. I tried dialing. Busy. Dead air. Busy again. After the 10th attempt, I gave up, the phone clicking uselessly in my hand. Then, the sirens started. Not one or two, but a chorus of wails echoing from the distant streets. Overlapping sirens, a cacophony of emergency, cutting through the uneasy quiet. Police cruisers, ambulances, maybe even the deep, guttural bellow of a fire truck or two. Vehicles, engines screaming, barreled down the main road at the end of my block. I ran to my bedroom window, the one overlooking the street. The main avenue, still just out of sight, was clearly the epicenter of something chaotic. The combined sirens, the urgent, panicked honking, painted a picture of escalating crisis. Most neighbors, sensing the shift, retreated indoors, doors slamming shut. A few stragglers remained outside, confused, uncertain. Walking dogs, pacing driveways, heads swiveling, scanning the horizon. A block over, a cluster of people stood on the sidewalk, gesturing wildly, peering down the road as if something truly alarming was approaching, something unseen but palpable. Then, the emergency alert, shrill and insistent, blared from my phone. All residents advised to shelter in place. Do not leave unless absolutely necessary. Avoid contact with anyone exhibiting unusual behavior. Moments later, a second alert, this time from a local news app. Citywide closures in effect. Schools, certain businesses, and public buildings. Just like that, the gears of normal life ground to a screeching halt. I grabbed my shortwave radio, scanning the frequencies systematically, methodically. On one channel, amidst the static and noise, a voice, calm yet strained, shaky with fear, repeated a chilling message. We have unconfirmed reports, the infected, extremely hostile. If you are safe, remain where you are. Avoid drawing attention to yourself. The signal dissolved into static again, fragments of words swallowed by the interference. But the word, infected, it sent a jolt of ice through my veins. 9:30 a.m., first signs. By mid-morning, the world outside had undergone a subtle but profound transformation. The mild confusion of the early hours had curdled into an unsettling hush. The frantic energy had subsided, replaced by a tense, pregnant quiet. I peered again through the narrow gap in my blinds, observing the street. A couple of vehicles sat abandoned, idling in the middle of the road, doors flung wide, as if the drivers had simply vanished. On the sidewalk, 3 figures shuffled along with halting, uneven steps. One wore a tattered shirt, ripped at the seams. Another's jacket was torn, threads trailing in the morning breeze. They moved with a disturbing lack of purpose, heads swiveling, not with normal curiosity, but with a disoriented, searching quality. They reminded me of how someone might move when dizzy or feverish or deeply ill. Their heads jerked up at intermittent noises. A dog barking in the distance, a gate creaking on its hinges, a car alarm that suddenly blared, then died away in the silence. As they approached a house across the street, one of them, without warning, suddenly charged the front door, clawing, scratching, pounding with fists against the solid wood. Another circled around the side of the house, moving with a disturbing, animalistic intent. The third, detached, almost disinterested, simply wandered off, disappearing around the corner of the building, for reasons I couldn't even begin to fathom. Then, a scream, erupting from inside the house, sharp and terrified. The door rattled violently on its hinges. I couldn't see anyone inside, the windows obscured by curtains, but muffled yelling, desperate cries for help, drifted through the thin suburban walls. Within seconds, as suddenly as it had begun, the person at the door gave up, stumbled away, joining the other shuffling figure who had circled the house. They moved on, leaving the source of the screams behind, as if their attention had already moved on to something else, something unseen, unheard. Paralyzed, I stood there, frozen, uncertain. Should I do something? Call the police? Shout a warning? Attempt to help? But what help could I offer? A sickening realization dawned. The chaos on the news, the frantic reports, it wasn't some distant, abstract threat. It was here, unfolding on my own street. This was no ordinary health crisis. People were changing, turning erratic, violent, with terrifying speed and little to no warning. Logical action, that's what I needed. Reinforce the house. Further, I shoved a heavy bookshelf against the front door, creating a rudimentary barricade. Heavy-duty locks were good, but an extra layer of physical resistance felt necessary. I moved furniture in front of the larger windows, the ones without permanent bars or shutters, blocking them from view, obscuring the interior from prying eyes. Block, conceal, remain silent. The plan, etched in my mind for years, reasserted itself. Simple, effective, survival-oriented. 10:30 a.m. Unwanted visitor. Close to mid-morning, I took a moment, a stolen breath in the rising tide of panic, to check my phone. Local group chats were exploding, flooded with panicked messages, garbled accounts of the bizarre, hostile behavior erupting across the neighborhood. I typed out a quick message to a close friend who lived across town. Stay inside. Seeing infected people around. Barricade your place. The message hung, stubbornly, on sending. No signal. Most network signals were overloaded or simply down. Communication was becoming spotty, unreliable. Suddenly, a soft tapping at the front door. Not the angry pounding from moments ago, but a careful, hesitant rapping. I crept to the door, adrenaline surging, and listened. A muffled voice, barely audible through the thick wood, whispered my name. Identified itself as a neighbor. From the end of the street. Are you alone? I called out, voice strained, cautious. He confirmed it. Through the peephole, I saw him. Pale, frantic eyes wide with fear. Part of me, a deeply ingrained human instinct, wanted to throw open the door, pull him inside, offer sanctuary. But another part, colder, more calculating, remembered the warnings. Infection could spread through contact. Moreover, I had just witnessed those things roaming my block. Could I be sure he hadn't been exposed? He spoke again, voice trembling slightly. Please, I need food and water. It's chaos out there, indecision, a brutal internal war. Every survival instinct screamed, do not open the door. Not to someone I couldn't fully trust. Not in this moment of absolute, terrifying uncertainty. No matter how desperate, how heartbreaking the situation seemed. Did you get hurt? I asked, voice barely a whisper. Are you scratched? Anything? He replied, voice cracking, that he was fine. But could I verify it? If this infection was as easily transmitted as the rumors suggested, any direct interaction was a gamble, a potentially fatal risk. Guilt, sharp and agonizing, twisted in my gut. Hesitation, cold pragmatism warring with basic human decency. Yet, I had to think rationally. My entire plan, my years of preparation, hinged on minimizing risk, controlling the variables. If I opened that door, and he happened to be infected, it could be the end of everything. For me, for any chance of survival. Before I could respond, before I could make a decision, we both heard it. Growling noises, guttural and inhuman, drifting from somewhere nearby. The neighbor panicked, bolted, ran away from my porch into the street. Through the peephole, I saw it all unfold in slow motion. He sprinted into the open, and two of the infected figures, caught sight of his movement. Pursuit. His voice, a strangled cry, carried across the block, followed by a brief, brutal scuffle. I couldn't clearly see. Fear, paralyzing, gripped me. I remained silent, frozen, focusing on survival, telling myself, over and over, there was nothing I could do. Nothing. 11:30 a.m. Military convoy. The day was still bright, sunlight filtering through the clouds, yet it felt like dusk. Atmosphere heavy, oppressive. Unease, thick as fog, enveloped every street. Sirens had faded, replaced by a different soundtrack of chaos. Sporadic car alarms, the persistent beep-beep-beep of an abandoned vehicle's open door, occasionally breaking the strained silence. Then, a rumbling. Deep, resonant, vibrating from the main avenue a block away. Large vehicles. Trucks, perhaps. Military. Peeking out a side window, I saw them. A military convoy, creeping forward, a line of hulking trucks, armored vehicles, followed by a string of ambulances. The lead vehicle turned onto my street, then abruptly halted. Something in the distance had caught their attention. Another group of infected, perhaps. Uniformed figures, soldiers, jumped down from the trucks, pointing, shouting instructions to each other. A few tried to usher panicked residents, those still foolish enough to be outside, into the back of an armored truck, waving them over with a desperate, controlled urgency. At first, it looked almost organized. A controlled response. But it deteriorated within seconds. 3 infected figures lurched into view from behind a row of parked cars. One of them, a shambling figure in torn clothes, lunged at a uniformed officer who tried to shove it away, rifle raised. But the infected remained relentless. A scuffle. Then chaos erupted. All at once, more infected emerged, seemingly from nowhere, pouring out of side streets, drawn by the noise, the sudden surge of activity. Military personnel tried to fire warning shots into the air, rifles cracking, echoing through the street. Civilians shrieked, panicked, ran in every direction. Vehicles collided as drivers, caught in the pandemonium, lost control, panicked, and crashed into each other. The convoy, whatever semblance of order it had possessed, dissolved instantly. A few trucks, engines roaring, sped away, retreating, leaving behind those that were blocked, damaged, or overrun. I watched, heart pounding, as an ambulance attempted a desperate U-turn, only to crash into a parked car, the screech of metal on metal echoing in the sudden silence. The driver, dazed, disoriented, stumbled out of the wreckage, calling for assistance, a broken plea in the unfolding apocalypse. The infected swarmed, drawn by the sound, the movement, the fresh target, forcing the driver, abandoning his vehicle, to flee on foot, a desperate, hopeless dash into the unknown. Within minutes, the street was deserted, except for the abandoned vehicles, and a few scattered infected, rummaging aimlessly through the wreckage, the aftermath of the failed rescue attempt. Whatever plan the convoy had tried to implement, it had failed. Spectacularly. From my vantage point, safe behind barricaded windows, it was horrifyingly clear. Even well-trained forces, armed and armored, were struggling to contain this plague. 12:30 p.m., sheltering and observing. Around midday, the sun reaching its zenith, I decided to take stock, regroup, and plan. My situation, my resources, my next steps. Decision: stay put. Do not leave the house unless absolutely, irrevocably necessary. Supplies. Inventory again. Sufficient for several weeks if I rationed carefully. Small battery-powered fan, a whisper of comfort in the mounting heat. Dried foods, staples from a forgotten world. Portable stove, reliable and silent. Clean water, the most precious commodity. Basement, prepped, secure. Secondary shelter, if the house itself became untenable. I warmed a small portion of canned soup on the camp stove in the kitchen, keeping the curtains drawn, the world outside at bay. The familiarity of a warm meal, the simple, mundane act of eating, offered a sliver of normalcy. A brief, fragile moment of calm in the swirling maelstrom. Radio, scanning again. Sporadic updates, most frequencies either static, dead air, or looped messages. One station, a robotic voice repeating endlessly, "This is an emergency broadcast. Remain indoors. If you suspect infection, isolate immediately. Military and medical response units are being deployed." The monotony of the announcements. The lack of concrete information offered little comfort, little new knowledge. While my soup cooled, I checked my phone again. Local community group chat, still buzzing, a frantic hive of rumors. Spreads through bites, someone typed, urgent, panicked. Another, symptoms start with dizziness, then violent outbursts. One message, chillingly, even claimed that the infected had no sense of self-preservation. Unverified accounts, all of them, but they mirrored what I had witnessed, what I had seen with my own eyes on my street. I tried sending a text to my parents, who lived several hours away, urging them to stay put, lock their doors, stay safe. The message remained stuck on sending, no progress. Cell towers overloaded, buckling under the surge of calls and texts. Or worse, compromised. Down. 1:30 p.m., strange silence. A bit past noon, midday heat pressing down, I overheard voices, drifting from outside. Not the guttural growls, the inhuman moans I had come to associate with the infected. Normal conversation, human voices. Carefully, cautiously, I pulled a curtain aside, a sliver of vision into the street. A small group, 5 people, maybe, moving down the sidewalk. They carried makeshift weapons. A baseball bat, splintered wooden board, a golf club, even a broom handle. 2 of them wore backpacks, possibly filled with supplies, first aid materials, scavenged goods. They were calling out quietly, low voices, urging any survivors to come out, to join them. My immediate reaction, a turbulent mix of curiosity and caution. Strength in numbers. Yes, potentially beneficial, but also risk. Exposure. If even one of them was infected, asymptomatic, not yet showing the telltale signs, I'd be walking into a dangerous situation. On the other hand, resources, shared defense, mutual support, it could be beneficial. Weighing the odds, leaning instinctively towards caution. Group dynamics, in a crisis like this, unpredictable. If conditions worsened, if resources dwindled, the group could turn on itself. One neighbor, a woman from a house down the street, emerged from her yard, hesitant, blinking in the sudden sunlight. Conversed briefly with the group, then nodded, a silent agreement. Decided to join them. I glimpsed the group heading further down the street, fading into the haze of heat and fear, presumably looking to gather more people. Their attempt at forming a community rescue effort, admirable. Brave. Foolhardy? I hoped they would succeed. Hoped they would find strength, safety in numbers. But I also worried. Worried about the risk of confrontation. With the infected. With each other. Would their improvised weapons be enough? Against the relentless, inhuman aggression I had already witnessed? The question hung in the air, unanswered, heavy with uncertainty. I remained behind my barricaded windows, watching, observing. Perhaps, if I had family nearby, close friends within reach, I would have ventured out, joined them. But my plan, years in the making, grounded in pragmatic preparedness, was to wait, observe, conserve my stamina. Rushing into the open, into the unpredictable chaos of the streets, felt unwise, given the aggression I had seen, given the unknowns that still swirled, thick and suffocating, around me. 2:30 p.m., growing menace. By early afternoon, the temperature outside had risen sharply, the sunlight beating down, draping the street in a harsh, unforgiving glow. Through the small gaps in my window coverings, I noticed more of them, more infected, stumbling around, seemingly aimless. They moved in loose packs, clustering around anything that made noise, any flicker of motion. An occasional car screeched by in the distance, tires protesting on the hot asphalt, drawing them like moths to a flickering, deadly flame. An unnerving aspect became apparent. The infected no longer appeared to recognize danger, not in any normal way. One figure, clothing ripped and shredded, pushed blindly against a barbed wire fence, oblivious to the sharp edges, the tearing metal. Another trudged directly over broken glass, shards crunching underfoot, without reacting, without flinching. Their lack of self-preservation. It matched the rumors, the whispers I'd read online. Whatever had taken hold of them, whatever twisted virus or infection had consumed them, it had dulled normal human instincts, replaced them with something else. Something predatory, mindless, and relentlessly aggressive. From time to time, I spotted an infected person simply slumped on a porch or in a driveway, sprawled out, motionless, as if in a daze. They could remain that way for a while, unmoving, inert, only to snap into violent action if a sudden distraction occurred. A door creaking in the wind, a bird taking flight from a nearby tree. This unpredictable nature made the situation even more troubling. They weren't like standard monsters, the relentless, shuffling hordes of fiction. They could pause, lurk, become almost dormant, then erupt into violence, with startling speed, startling ferocity, at any moment. The otherworldly stillness of the neighborhood, punctuated by these erratic bursts of noise, these sudden, violent movements, created a sense that normal life had been stripped away, peeled back, revealing something raw, brutal, and alien underneath. It was around this time, staring out at the empty, sun-baked street, watching the shuffling figures move with their terrifying, inhuman purpose, that I finally, fully accepted it. The world as I knew it was gone, changed. Civilization's old rhythms, its comforting predictability, might never return. 3:30 p.m., dog incident. The afternoon light began to soften, lengthening shadows across the yards, painting the familiar suburban landscape in hues of deepening gold. I was in my living room, restless, scanning the shortwave radio again, desperate for any new broadcasts, any flicker of reliable information. Then I heard it. A dog barking, sharp, insistent, echoing down the street. Agitated, cornered, perhaps, threatened. The barking echoed, a sharp, frantic sound in the oppressive quiet. A dreadful feeling settled in my stomach. The noise, it would attract them, the infected, to its source. Stealing a glance through a gap in the curtains, I saw it. A medium-sized dog, pacing frantically in someone's front yard, a blur of nervous energy against the stillness of the afternoon. Seemed frantic, spooked by the unusual quiet, by the unseen, pervasive presence of the infected. Sure enough, two of them, figures in torn clothing, shuffling around the corner, drawn by the noise, unerringly, like predators sensing prey. The dog barked louder, sharper, more desperate now, a repetitive, frantic yelp. The infected approached, shuffling closer, their movements slow, deliberate, yet terrifyingly purposeful. The dog growled, a low, rumbling warning, stepping back, uncertain, trapped. Then, as one infected figure lurched forward, arms outstretched, reaching, the dog bolted. Across the yard, desperate, terrified, trying to escape, to disappear down the street. The infected gave chase, in a lopsided, shambling run, arms reaching, grasping. I lost sight of them behind some hedges, the scene obscured. The barking faded, swallowed by distance, replaced by a series of muffled yelps, sharp cries of pain that twisted my stomach into knots. Then silence. A sudden, absolute, chilling silence. The entire event, less than a minute. Though I didn't see what happened next, the abrupt end to the barking suggested a grim outcome. Another reminder. These infected individuals, these creatures, they targeted any living thing that crossed their path. No sense of reason, no rationality behind their actions. Only raw, aggressive, predatory behavior, driven by something dark, something ancient, something fundamentally inhuman. 4:30 p.m. Nighttime strategy. As the day stretched on, lights softening, shadows lengthening, I began to prepare for the coming night. Darkness, a new layer of threat, even harder to spot them in the deepening gloom. And light, worried that using any type of light, even flashlights, might draw attention, might attract unwanted eyes in the dark. My plan for nightfall: blackout, windows entirely covered, shielded from the outside world. Rely on small, shielded lanterns in the safest rooms of the house. Minimum light, maximum stealth. Before sunset, the last golden rays fading, I gathered supplies for the long night ahead. Flashlight, red filter attached, less likely to attract attention, less visible from a distance. Small stash of snacks. Water bottle, refilled. Radio, shortwave, lifeline to the outside world. Portable charger, precious power source. I placed these in a room on the second floor, fewest windows, interior walls providing extra protection. Safe room, my refuge if the downstairs was ever compromised. Reflected, briefly, on whether I should attempt to reach a rumored safe zone. The old high school, a whispered location in the unreliable radio chatter. But radio transmissions too faint, too unreliable to confirm anything concrete. One fragmented transmission mentioned a setup at the old high school, but it never repeated. Venturing outside, into the deepening twilight, felt too high risk, especially after witnessing how quickly they responded to movement, to noise. Instead, hunkering down, staying put, consolidating my defenses. For now, found a sliver of psychological comfort in rechecking locks, adjusting barricades, ensuring supplies were within arm's reach. Every so often, the guilt over not helping my neighbor, over the dog, weighed on me, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. But in a scenario like this, self-preservation took a firm hold. Survival instinct, raw and primal, pushing aside empathy, compassion, any lingering vestiges of normal morality. 5:30 p.m., distant screams. The sun dipped closer to the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, a final, beautiful farewell to a world that was rapidly fading. I could see a few of them, infected, moving aimlessly in the street, their silhouettes elongated, distorted by the setting sun. Whenever I heard a distant scream, carried on the still evening air, I tensed. Each sound, sporadic, echoing through the quiet neighborhood, a stark reminder. Someone else in trouble, someone else falling victim, an infected figure finding another target. A local radio broadcast, crackling to life for a fleeting moment. A voice, urgent, desperate, breaking through the static. Reports of extremely high infection rate. Encourage all survivors, remain hidden, until daylight, if possible. Then, static swallowed the rest of the transmission, words dissolving back into noise. But the confirmation, from an official or semi-official source, reinforced my plan. Stay put. Overnight. Darkness falling. Danger rising. As I settled in for the night, a dull, chilling clarity settled over me. Less than 12 hours had passed since I first noticed something was wrong. Society crumbled at a pace I never thought possible. Most neighbors vanished, ghosts in their own homes. Houses stood dark, silent, lights off, windows shuttered. Major news channels, sporadic updates at best. It was as if the entire city, the entire world, had gone into a deep freeze, waiting for something else to happen. Something worse? 6:30 p.m., facing the unknown. By 6:30 p.m., early twilight descended, a gray veil drawn across the sky. Streets dimly lit by a few lone lamp posts, flickering, sputtering, still somehow powered by a fragment of the grid that hadn't yet collapsed. Many lights flickered, died, leaving pockets of absolute darkness. The usual comforting glow of houses, lamps in living rooms, TVs flashing behind curtains, absent. Nothing but a hush lay over the block, broken only by occasional, unsettling movements. An inhuman moan, drifting from somewhere in the distance. I took a seat on a couch in the back room of my house, scribbling notes in a small journal, a physical record in a digital wasteland. Documented what I had seen, the infected, their erratic patterns, the failed military convoy, the neighborhood group, briefly brave, foolishly hopeful. The neighbor who had pleaded for help at my door, then vanished into the night. Writing it down served two purposes. First, a sense of structure, order amidst the chaos. Second, a record might prove useful if anyone else ever stumbled across my home, searching for answers in the aftermath. In the quiet moments, thoughts drifting. Future. Would there be a rescue operation? Eventually? Was this outbreak limited to our region? Or was the entire country, even the planet, facing the same crisis? No way to know. Communication lines, unreliable. Internet, spotty at best. Some websites still functioned, ghostly echoes of a connected world, but they were rarely updated, stagnant. One official government site, a skeletal presence online, displayed a stark banner. National emergency declared. Follow local guidelines. That was all. A digital ghost in the machine. Ended that 12th hour by checking the basement one more time. Everything in place. The sense of relief I used to feel when verifying my supplies years ago during drills, practice runs, replaced by a stark realization. I was truly relying on them now. Not for a drill, not for practice, but for survival. After the first 12 hours, those initial 12 hours. Transformative. In half a day, a virus, or infection, or whatever it was, spread with unimaginable speed, terrifying efficiency, transformed regular people, my neighbors, into dangerous entities that knew no fear, no rational thought. The entire notion of civilization collapsed on my street in a matter of hours, and I suspected the same was happening in countless other places. My preparedness gave me a degree of safety, enough food, water, gear to stay hidden for some time. But how long would that last? And what about other survivors? Some might be roaming in groups. Some might be holed up, like me, and others might be infected, without even knowing it yet. The most excruciating part, the uncertainty. No reliable news, no consistent instructions, just scraps of information from a battered, broken system. Decision: wait until daybreak to try reaching anyone else. Maybe attempt to find that rumored safe zone at the high school. If it turned out to be a hoax or overrun, I'd come back home, continue surviving as best as I could. My life, in that moment, narrowed to a single, desperate objective: stay safe until a path to real help emerged, or until it became terrifyingly clear that I was truly on my own. For now, I had this house, my stockpile, and my training. I had hope that beyond the infected, beyond the chaos, there were others like me, holding on, waiting for a chance to rebuild something from this devastation. If you're reading these words, it means there's still some thread of hope, linking one survivor to another. Let this account be a testament to what happened when our world turned upside down. Nothing is certain anymore, except that daybreak will come, and with it, the next chapter of this ongoing crisis. The creatures, my former neighbors, will still be out there. The roads will still be littered with abandoned cars. The fate of my city, perhaps the world, will hang in fragile balance. Yet, I remain determined. Every skill I've practiced, every lesson I've learned, now comes into focus. If I survive beyond these 12 hours, it won't be because luck favored me. It'll be because cautious planning, clear thinking, and a willingness to adapt prevailed in the face of an unimaginable disaster. And if you're out there reading this, I urge you to do the same. Remain calm, evaluate every choice carefully, and remember, even in the darkest moments, Survival is possible. Final note. After deciding to document the core timeline of events, I realized there were many additional moments and insights that might prove useful to anyone in a similar crisis. Early on, I noticed it was easier to pick up reliable radio signals in the early morning or late at night, possibly because of reduced interference. Some frequencies carried automated loops of instructions or warnings, and careful listening sometimes revealed repeated phrases or partial coordinates that could point to safe zones. I also found that attaching a simple wire extension to my radio antenna offered a slight improvement in reception, although stepping outside to set it up was incredibly risky once the infected began roaming everywhere. Within my own home, I had a reinforced front door, thanks to a steel plate and deadbolt locks, and when the situation escalated, I placed a heavy bookshelf against it to make forced entry nearly impossible without specialized equipment. The first-floor windows, while reasonably sturdy, felt more secure after I boarded them up. Downstairs, the basement had a solid interior lock and an emergency exit hidden behind thick foliage, perfect for a stealthy escape if the ground floor was ever breached. Regarding the infection itself, most people believed it spread through bites, though there was speculation that scratches or other forms of contact might also transmit it. One rumor suggested the infection took hold in minutes, causing immediate collapse of normal behavior, while others thought the timeline could be an hour or two. Nobody seemed to have solid proof either way. During those tense hours, I realized that maintaining emotional balance was just as important as physical safety. Constant alertness took a toll, so I made a point of taking brief breaks to stay composed. Small, regular meals and plenty of water were vital for both physical stamina and mental clarity. I also recorded my experiences in a notebook, which helped me process the surrounding chaos and keep my thoughts from spiraling out of control. Observing the infected, I noted that they showed little recognition of injuries, often pressing on despite cuts or obstacles. Sounds seemed to trigger their attention. Even minor noises like leaves rustling or a can tipping over could draw them in. In most cases, they moved with a stagger, but they were capable of lunging with startling speed when provoked or when a clear target presented itself. Reflecting on these first 12 hours, I see how my years of preparation gave me a certain advantage in handling isolation and rationing supplies. Still, no amount of drills could fully prepare me for the reality of familiar faces transformed into threatening wanderers, or for the moral choices that came with protecting my own life at the expense of helping others. Surviving those initial hours was one challenge. Living with the weight of those decisions was another. At this point, my plan is to continue watching and listening for any sign of organized rescue or a collective effort I might safely join. Should that not materialize, I'll carry on alone. This first half day of upheaval showed me just how fragile a sense of normalcy can be when faced with an outbreak that spreads at unimaginable speed. For anyone else who finds themselves hunkered down at home, supplies in place, doing all they can to avoid detection, understand that you aren't alone in this. Many others are likely taking cover, monitoring radios, and quietly hoping for daybreak. These hours are merely the start of something far larger, and the days ahead may bring even greater challenges. Each sunrise is another opportunity to endure, find allies, and push back against the chaos, redefining our world. That said, it's important to remember that my story reflects only what I encountered here. Conditions in other areas could be entirely different, and what worked for me may not work for everyone. Remain flexible, adapt to changing situations, and never underestimate the unpredictability of both the infected and other survivors. Finally, having lived through this initial half-day of crisis, I'm convinced that careful planning and a level head are the best defenses anyone can have. If you face a similar emergency, act swiftly to secure your surroundings, avoid all unnecessary contact, and keep a clear mind. Rational decisions can serve as the strongest barrier between you and a threat that defies everything we once considered normal. Stay alert, stay prepared, and remember, you're not alone in this. If I can endure these first 12 hours, so can you. Let the human spirit guide you towards safety and, hopefully, a brighter outcome than the one we all feared. Who knows what tomorrow and the day after will bring? Only the sunrise and the long hours that follow will tell.